With Valentine's Day around the corner, there's arguably no better time to confess your undying love to that special someone in your life. Unless you're Stephen Grant, that is. Because the only thing he confessed was to the murder of his wife. Wait until you hear the details surrounding this case. But first, let me welcome you to today's investigation. I'm Brooke, and this is Armchair Investigator. Valentine's Day. On Valentine's Day in 2007, Stephen Grant walked into the Macomb County Police Department to report his wife missing. What nobody knew at the time was Tara had already been dead for days. Where did things go so wrong? Mother of two, was a vibrant, ambitious person. She was intelligent, had a love for art, and wanted to make sure her family had a comfortable life. And they did. The family lived in a nice neighborhood in Washington Township, drove new cars, and their children attended private school. People described Stephen as the polar opposite of his wife. Tara was outgoing and well-liked, while Stephen was described as more of an odd duck. In an interview with True Crime Daily, his childhood friend summed him up best.
He was the guy that you thought would grow up and rob a liquor store and leave his name tag on, and you'd see him on The Stupidest Criminals.
Well, you weren't wrong there, Ken. Tara landed a great job working in a management position with an international construction and engineering firm called Washington Group International. She'd been with the company for 12 years, and it was safe to say she was climbing the corporate ladder. Her position within the company meant she often traveled a lot for work, but she was pulling in a cushy six-figure income. On the outside, it looked like they were a great team, making the best of the situation. Stephen was self-titled Mr. Mom. He was the one holding down the fort at home and taking care of the kids. He worked part-time for his father, who owned a small two-man machine shop in Mount Clemens. In August of 2006, they hired an au pair, a live-in nanny named Verena, who helped look after the kids. The couple had been married for 10 years. Why would the 37-year-old husband and father commit such a gruesome act? Tara had been traveling for work pretty extensively for the last 5 months. Monday through Friday, she was away for work. On Friday evenings, she'd hop on a plane and come home. Come Monday morning, she was flying back out for work. On the evening of Friday, February 9th, Tara arrived home per usual. Only this time, according to Stephen, she told him she'd be flying back out for work on Sunday, a day earlier than normal. Stephen was upset and told her she needed to be home more. The two argued. He then alleges he heard her on her phone saying something along the lines of, "I'll be out in a minute." He says Tara packed her bags and left the house. When he looked out the window, he saw her get into a black sedan. A few hours later, he called her and left a voicemail.
"Sarah, next time I call you, pick up your phone. Please do not hit ignore. It's absolute. You can call me or your kids. Pick up your phone. Well, call the house. Call somewhere. Call me. Call myself. Call the kids. I know you're mad. I'm mad."
Over the next few days, he called Tara several more times, but got no answer. Gee, I wonder why that is, Stephen. On Valentine's Day, Stephen reports his wife missing. He tells detectives after their argument she left home and he believed she flew back to work, but he'd been trying hard to get a hold of her. Detectives immediately thought it was odd that he waited so long to report his wife missing, but Stephen had a somewhat logical answer to this. He explained to them that they'd had fights before where Tara would leave for a day or two to cool off, but said she'd always come back. Stephen agrees to let detectives come to their home the same night he reports her missing. They had a gut feeling about him. They couldn't quite put their finger on it, and at this point had no direct evidence he was involved, but still, something was off. He appeared nervous and fidgety, almost scared. As detectives were leaving, they asked if he'd be willing to come down to the sheriff's office the following day for a lie detector test. He agreed. The following day, he never showed up. Instead, he lawyered up. He stopped talking to the police and started talking to the media. For weeks, Stephen played the part of worried husband, declaring his innocence and giving teary-eyed interviews to reporters. He pleaded for his wife to come home. If not for him, then for the kids. He was constantly calling newsrooms and reporters on their cell phones.
"You see her? Tell me. Please."
The more he appeared on the news, the more divided the public became about him. During one of his last interviews, Stephen talked about his growing frustration with his marriage. At one point he said, "To be honest, as weird as it sounds for me to say this, I was the perfect mom, not Tara." Yikes. Detectives watched all his interviews and took notes too. They even had surveillance set up on him, something Stephen didn't take too kindly to, publicly accusing the police of harassment. Try as they might, investigators couldn't find a trail for Tara. She wasn't using her cell phone, laptop, or personal credit cards. They checked all the airlines and knew she hadn't used her passport. None of her family had heard from her either. During his media interviews, detectives noticed Stephen kept mentioning Stony Creek, a local park, a little too often. And with Tara's trail going cold, no physical evidence to execute a search warrant, the sheriff announces to the public 10 days after she was reported missing that they were going to search the park over the weekend. For 6 hours, more than 150 searchers, along with sniffer dogs on the ground and a helicopter overhead, combed through a 3-mile grid of the park. The searchers come up empty-handed. It would be another 4 days before detectives get a break in the case. A woman taking a walk along the local preserve trail by her house spotted something odd laying on the ground. It caught her eye by how much it stood out due to the snow on the ground and the bright red contents in the bag. By this point, all the locals knew about Tara. The story about the missing, successful mother of 2 was making headlines daily. The woman who found the bag thought it was something police should see. She couldn't have been more right. Using her mitten, she picked up the 1-gallon Ziploc bag, took it home, and called police. Inside the Ziploc bag, deputies find latex gloves, metal shavings, and Tara's DNA. Remember earlier when I mentioned that Stephen's father owned a machine shop and Stephen worked there part-time? Well, the metal shavings along with Tara's DNA found in the Ziploc bag were enough to get detectives their search warrant. 2 days later, on Friday, March 2nd, detectives and crime scene technicians arrived to search the Grant home. They weren't really expecting much, since Tara had been missing for 3 weeks at this point. As a group of detectives waited in the garage while crime scene technicians processed the house, one detective noticed something he was positive was not there when they first came to the house the night of February 14th to interview Stephen: a green storage bin. Inside the bin was a black garbage bag, and inside that garbage bag, another garbage bag. The detective started ripping open the bags, only to make a gruesome discovery. Inside was a female torso. What? My eye is literally twitching thinking about that. If you're wondering where Stephen was while they were searching his home, oh, he was there all right, and it was safe to say he was sweating bullets. Soon after the search begins, Stephen asks if he can take the family dog for a walk. Even though law enforcement had received a search warrant, they didn't have probable cause to arrest him, and he wasn't being detained. He literally walked away. Bye, Steve. Reporters were also there on the scene, and they said Stephen kept looking back as though he couldn't believe no one was stopping him. By the time detectives realized Stephen was gone, he had gotten an hour-and-a-half lead on them. It was clear he was on the run. A manhunt is launched. Cell towers show Stephen was heading north. They would later learn he was driving a yellow Dodge Dakota pickup he borrowed from a friend. He was heading to Wilderness State Park in northern Michigan, roughly 225 miles from his home in Washington Township. At 6:30 Sunday morning, police find the abandoned Dodge Dakota at the state park and follow the footprints left in the snow. They lead straight to Stephen. He was lying under a tree wearing only a shirt, pants, and socks. He had no weapons on him, but was armed with a toy gun, alcohol, and razors. Temperatures had fallen to 14 degrees Fahrenheit, and he had been outside for roughly 8 hours. He had frostbite and extreme hypothermia. Detectives said he was semi-conscious, seeing people that weren't there and talking to trees. Can you imagine coming across that mess? He's airlifted and taken to Northern Michigan Hospital in Petoskey, where he's placed under guard. It's there he decides he's ready to talk. From his hospital bed, a frostbitten Stephen talks to police for roughly 2 hours, recounting the horrific details of his wife's savage murder. Detectives would say that the way he retold his story was as simple as talking to friends over a cup of coffee. There were points in his story where Stephen almost seemed proud of himself, and at other times, he recounted the story almost as if it was comedic to him. Let's go back to Friday, February 9th. The day Tara arrives home from work. Stephen told detectives it started with a fight in the master bedroom when Tara told him she'd be flying out for work a day earlier than normal. Stephen got upset and told her she wasn't spending enough time at home. He said Tara basically told him she had to do what she had to do for her job and that it was none of Stephen's business. She turned to walk away and Stephen grabbed her wrist. He told her she wasn't going anywhere and that they were going to finish the conversation. That's when she slapped him. He said he didn't quite remember what happened after that, but somehow she fell and banged the back of her head on the floor. According to him, she then said something like, "That's it, I'm taking the kids. You're going to be homeless. You're a piece of shit." That's when he choked her. The couple's 4-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter were asleep in their bedrooms nearby. The au pair was out with friends. After choking Tara, he dragged her out to the garage and put her in the back of her SUV. He went back upstairs only to hear the front door opening. It was their au pair, Verena. He told her the same story he initially told police, that they had a fight and Tara left in a black sedan. Tara's body would remain inside the SUV in the garage all day Saturday. By Sunday, he had come up with a plan. He drove the SUV to his father's shop where he then dismembered his wife. He admits he threw up a few times, but felt like he had no other options, otherwise he would go to prison. Look where he is now. Oh, the irony. When he was done, he drove back home and joined the au pair and the kids for a nice Sunday afternoon. So sweet. He told detectives, "I tried to make things as normal as possible for everybody, and I continuously flirted with Verena because I thought that was the only way I was going to be able to get through this." Jerk. So, this is where I should mention that Verena is their 19-year-old German au pair. Oh, and also apparently at some point in between choking his wife and moving the body, Stephen texted Verena, "You owe me a kiss," and then left her a note on her pillow. No. Gross. On Monday, February 12th at 3 a.m., Stephen traveled to Stony Creek Park to scatter her remains. On Tuesday at dusk, he returned to the park to finish the job and be done with it. Yeah, that was until the sheriff announced on February 24th that they'd be searching the park. Literally hours before the sheriff's search, Stephen goes back to the park, recovers the torso, and drives it back over to his father's machine shop to store it in the loft. Literally hours. Hours. How is a man like Stephen, as anxious as he is, able to do all of this without having a heart attack? As somebody who is also an anxious person, there is no way. Obviously, I wouldn't even do this in the first place, but you know what I mean. 5 days later, he came back with a green plastic container, put the remains in it, and drove back home to store it in his garage. Hoping for the best. Stephen admitted to detectives that he thought he had gotten away with it. After that, Stephen's lawyer announces that he will no longer be representing him. The day after his capture and confession, Stephen was arraigned. They literally rolled him into the courtroom in a hospital wheelchair wearing the old-style prison stripes rather than the conventional jumpsuit. The sheriff personally selected it for maximum humiliation. Even with a recorded and signed confession, Stephen would plead not guilty to the charge of first-degree murder. Coward. A first-degree murder charge would send him to prison without the possibility of parole due to it being premeditated. A second-degree murder charge, however, might allow him the possibility to be free at some point due to being paroled. Yeah, safe to say that nobody wanted to see that. His trial began 10 months after his arrest. The prosecutor wasn't buying Stephen's story about him and Tara fighting over her traveling so much. He thought it was more about Stephen wanting to replace his wife with his au pair, referencing the text he sent her immediately after taking Tara's life. During the trial, a former girlfriend of Stephen's came forward with evidence that included flirtatious emails he'd been sending her before Tara's death. The former au pair also flew in from Germany to take the stand. She testified that she joined the Grant household in August of 2006, and by the end of January, her relationship with Stephen had gone from flirty to physical. She went on to say that a few days before Tara's death, her and Stephen started cozying up together, in her bed. On February 8th, the night before Tara arrived home, Stephen convinced her to go to bed with him in the master bedroom. That's where their physical relationship went from cuddling to third base. The next morning, Tara and Stephen's 6-year-old daughter walked into the bedroom. Verena said she had to hide beneath the sheets. You just had to bring it into the marital bedroom, didn't you? Meanwhile, the defense kept asking, where were the signs that Stephen prepared for this crime? Arguing instead that Stephen snapped during the confrontation and therefore should not be found guilty of first-degree murder. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning a verdict. Guilty of murder in the second degree. Ultimately, he was sentenced to 50 to 80 years. What do you think? Do you think it was premeditated, meaning he had plans to do it, or do you think he snapped? I'm a little bit on the fence on this one. There is a part of me that thinks that he did just snap, but there's also a part of me that thinks it was premeditated. Given the fact that their 6-year-old daughter also walked into the bedroom the morning Tara was supposed to come home, We don't know if she did see anything or if the nanny was able to hide herself. She walks into mommy and daddy's bedroom. She sees daddy in bed with the nanny. And I think that at 6 years old, she could have explained to her mom what she saw. I don't know if that was a chance that Stephen was willing to take. It could possibly be that up until that point, he had had no thoughts of harming his wife and taking her life until the morning she was supposed to come home. While I have my reservations about him plotting to take his wife's life, I fully believe that he would have been open to having an affair. If you're a fellow Michigan native, comment below if you remember this case. If you enjoyed today's investigation, give this video a thumbs up, and hey, while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel.